I am going to take this opportunity to introduce Jim Lamb and his associate, John Flood. Both of them are retired FBI agents. I want you to know I am proudly wearing my G-Man pin. Okay. They get an applause even before they begin. I'm intimidated. All right, you guys are good. But I'm very proud to be wearing my G-Man pin here. Compliments of Mr. Flood, the very first time he came and spoke with us here. Obviously, a very noble profession, and they are going to tell you a few things here about being an FBI agent. And we have a day in the life. So, Jim, we're going to turn this over to you for a few minutes.
Good afternoon. How's everybody today? Good. This summer, I met Dr. Plaskin, actually taking his class. I'm a part-time student here at the university, so I feel your pain as you're going through this. It's probably a little easier for you than it is for me. I haven't written a paper in about 35 years. But we took a class, and it had to do with teaching as a profession, and part of that was we had to actually go out into a school, and it was the Day in the Life program. So as a takeoff from that, I thought I would do a day in the life, although it was going to be a little more than a day, of a street agent. And that's what I was for the majority of my career. By way of background, I'm a graduate from the University of Maryland. I know you guys don't like that, but I'm an accounting major, and I'm a CPA, and that was my entree into the FBI. At that time, and still today to a certain extent, they look for accountants and lawyers. Today they actually look for a lot more because the world has changed, and computers are now part of it. Computers were not part of my world when I began with the FBI. We didn't have any computers, we didn't have any cell phones, we didn't have databases, nothing. When we wrote reports, we dictated them, and we had a stenotype them. So it gives you an idea of how far we've come. But
Here, Jim, I'll give you this.
no. So, but I never really wanted to be an accountant. As you can see, this was my world as an accountant. It was just my entree into, that was gave me the best chance of getting into the FBI. And once I got in, I very much enjoyed my time. I started out, and just so you know, I started out in Dallas, Texas. So I went from being the controller of a small company to being placed on what we called back then a reactive squad. And we handled bank robberies, fugitives, kidnappings, extortions. And it was a great time. I went from being in the office all the time to being out on the street, responding to bank robberies, arresting fugitives, working all these cases. It was just a lot of time. From there, I was transferred to the garden spot on the east coast of Newark, New Jersey. Anybody here from New Jersey? No?
Yes.
And eventually I settled out in all field offices. There are like 56 field offices now. They each have what they call these resident agencies, IRAs, which are smaller satellite offices that cover various parts of the state. Transferred from Newark to Red Bank and then to Charlottesville. I also did a short stint at FBI headquarters. I was here, I've been in here in Charlottesville. I was here from 1998 to 2014 in the IRA here, the small area. But I tell you that because if you're interested in this field, one thing about the Bureau is that you are eligible to transfer anywhere in the United States, and you can also apply. We also have offices outside and attached to the embassies throughout the world. So, but it's not always your choice. You're going to be, it's one of the phrases you hear all the time is the needs of the Bureau. So if the need of the Bureau is for you to go to Minot, North Dakota, guess what you're going to be doing? Buying a very warm coat and a snowblower, because that's where you're going to be assigned. So just keep that in mind. Like I say, it's wherever they want you to go, you will go. Over the course of my career, I worked, like I said, I started out in violent crimes. My background is accounting, as I told you. So I did a lot of work with financial crimes. I did public corruption. When I was in Newark, I was extorted to be the media coordinator for a little more than a year. A miserable job. During that period of time, they had, today's the anniversary of 9/11, well, the first World Trade Center bombing took place when I was the media coordinator in New Jersey. And it was very just a panicked kind of state, at least from the media, because you're always getting calls every day. Literally, I never left my office. I never left the phone because people were always calling it. I work traditional organized crime. Anybody here seen The Sopranos? Or The Godfather, right? You know, Sopranos for your generation, The Godfather for my generation. And I also had a wonderful opportunity to be a training counselor at Quantico, where we train all our agents. I was assigned there for one class, and I took one class for 20 weeks through there, where you're just sort of the mentor. So it was a great experience. And again, I tell you this because when you come into the Bureau, like I said, I was an accountant. There was a chance that I would not work any kind of financial crimes or white-collar crime or anything. Again, it's the needs of the Bureau. So if there was a need for me to work counterterrorism for my whole career, and the Bureau thought that was the best spot, that's where I would go. So when you come in, understand that you're going to go where they think is best. And that's just sort of the way the Bureau works. But when I want to talk about these things, but I want to sort of give you an idea, you know, sort of again, a day in the life. Take a case, I'm going to go through it a little bit, and I'm going to talk about it. So, does anybody recognize that guy? Would you buy a used car from that man?
No,
Why not?
because they're probably be dead body yet.
Oh, well, that's true. All right. Okay. Would you give him money? What if I told you people around the world gave him a total of $250 million? Terry Dowdell is the gentleman in there, and he ran what we call a Ponzi scheme. Anyone know what a Ponzi scheme is?
A Ponzi scheme is like a financial corruption thing where effectively like you pretend to be investing money, and so you ask people to give you money, and then like you slowly give back money, and effectively it's kind of complicated, but you get a lot of people's money and you can't keep giving it back. So like for a little bit he had a lot of money, and eventually you either get caught or it all blows in your face or something like that.
Yeah. Does everybody understand that? Yes.
It's like Amway without the horrible products.
Yes, exactly. So, as he said, you know, it's a scheme where, you know, people pay. I come to you, and Terry Dowdell said that he had an in with the Federal Reserve, where they would trade these short-term and long and medium-term bonds and debentures, all these bank debentures, and it was a low-risk, high-reward investment. It doesn't exist, exactly, right? Anybody heard about, right?
Connected to risk.
Exactly, exactly. But people believed him to the tune of $250 million. And it ran as long as there are new people coming in. And what happens is, you know, you give me money, and I start to pay you back, and then you tell your friend, and he tells a friend, and people. And as long as there are people that are still putting money into this thing, it will run. When they stop, or when people want their money back all at once, it crashes. So Terry Dowdell was what I would call the top of the pyramid. He ran this scheme, and he ran right here from Charlottesville. Exactly.
White collar crime.
So when we started to catch up with him and he pled guilty, two people, Shinder Gangar and Alan White, who were in Leicester, England, took over, and they continued this. Kenneth Mason, Gita Mecklenburg, Michael Hardesty were all the carnival barkers for this greatest, you know, this great investment, and they were out and they raised a lot of money, as did Shinder Gangar and Alan White. After Terry Dowdell gets caught, they freeze. We froze about $30 million in various accounts. He had a very nice house out here in in Ivy. Very nice cars, everything you could want if you had an unlimited amount of money, which he basically did.
He lives in Ivy.
And after they got caught, You know, there's no honor among thieves. Okay. So Terry Dowdell is on his way to jail, and he tells Mr. Gangar and Mr. White over there in England that for $500,000 they could pay a Department of Justice official, not me, but a Department of Justice official, and this would all go away. So what do? They grab Nigel Heath, the three of them put together some money, and they wire over the $500,000 through Greg and Mark Smythe, and they give it to Terry Dowdell, as if this thing is all going to go away. So after Terry Dowdell started this thing, and he got them all involved, one last con was to cheat them for $500,000 and making them believe that this thing was going to go away. Now, if you look up there, Gita Mecklenburg, and it says Andorra. Anybody know where Andorra is?
It's a really tiny country between Spain and France.
Exactly. Do we have?
Doesn't have an army anymore. They had an army of one with the bad guy.
And do we have diplomatic relations with Andorra?
What's the point? It's tiny. I don't know.
I don't think they're even officially a country, are they?
They are officially a country, yes. Yeah. So when all this took place and all this starts crashing down, what does Gita Mecklenburg do? She takes off for Andorra. So what does it take to get a fugitive back from? Because she took off before she was indicted or charged, and so we had to work with. We have a legal attaché associated with the embassy in Madrid, Spain, and they had to actually go to Andorra and see and work with their Department of Justice and get her extradited back to the United States. And what essentially they did was they booted her out of the country into Spain. Spain arrested her, and then we do have extradition with Spain, and they brought her back. She was none too happy to come back to the United States. And the reason I tell you all this thing is because this gives you sort of the breadth and the depth of this, one scheme that took place from little old Charlottesville right here. It was worldwide. People from all over the world contributed to this thing, believing that they were going to make a lot of money. In the end, let me just sort of give you some of the details. So what Terry Dowdell, he promised that you would get 160% return on your money.
People believe him.
To the tune of $250 million.
I have no hope for humanity. I understand why we're in a financial crisis now.
So again, he raised it. And so we had bank accounts all over, here in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Ireland, and Belgium. And we talked about the bribe and everything like that. There were guilty pleas and trials in both the United States. We actually indicted his wife for money laundering and for after the fact, and she went to jail. He pled guilty and he was sentenced to 15 years in jail. There was a trial over in the United Kingdom with Shinder Gangar and Alan White. I had a very nice trip paid to go over to England, testify in a British court. We actually get to stand. Have you ever heard the term "going to take the stand" when someone's going to testify? In British court, you actually stand in the witness box. You don't sit down. And they have the wigs and the judge and all the lawyers and everything, and they testified. And Mr. Gangar and Mr. White were convicted and went to jazz, and then later on, Nigel Heath pled guilty. But it was a fascinating case. It was great and very enjoyable. But you can imagine what it took. So you have all these accounts, bank accounts all over. You got to figure out who your victims are. They all have to be interviewed. You got to put together all your flow of the funds. You're going to charge these people. You're going to go to trial. But in the end, it was very successful. All defendants in this thing were either pled guilty or were convicted at trial. It was a great case. And I want to finish here because we're out of time. Okay, with this thing, I'll get to your question in just a second. Over my career, I've talked to a number of groups and everything. And one of the years ago, when I first came here, I talked to people who were at a bank, and these are the people out actually in the outside where you would go and you would make your deposit. and they wanted to know about bank robbers. And I talked about bank robbers. And I started off by saying, listen, if you don't remember anything, just remember this one thing. I told them, I said, your safety is paramount. We'll find the bank robber. The money is insured, not to worry, but your safety is paramount. I came back a year later to basically that same group, and I said, all right, I asked you a year ago to remember one thing. What was it? And so what do you think the percentage of people who remembered that one thing was?
What do you say, 5?
5? Anybody else want to take a guess? What's that? Okay. Anybody else?
30.
The reason for your 0.
0. So, but as I am a student here, I know that you're brighter than the people who work in the bank. So today, I want you to remember one thing about this talk today, and that is being a special agent in the FBI is the greatest job in the world. I've loved it for 29 years, enjoyed it, have no regrets, loved every day of it, and I hope that in your careers, you have as great a job as I did for that 29 years.
Did you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's
Okay, great. Well, then,
You-
Just, that case, like how long would a case like that keep you busy?
That case, so that case started in, let me see if I can remember this exactly. So it would have started August of 2011, okay? So 9/11 happens a month later. So where I have this huge case that's coming to me that I'm basically dedicating a lot of my resources. Then I have, a month later, or shortly after, I had to shift gears because we're in, I won't say we're in panic mode, but we're in panic mode. We were running all over. So, but eventually, so you had, so the original, it started 2001, okay. So Terry Dowdell probably pleads guilty in about 2004, 2005. We get Gita Mecklenburg extradited from Andorra in 2010. She pleads guilty, and I think she's the last of it. So it goes about 10 years from everything, from soup to nuts.
okay, excellent. I'm sure there'll be more questions after we hear from John. So Jim, thank you so much. It was really informative, amazing, totally amazing. Didn't tell us all the incredible things that people don't even know about. Okay, so I'm going to introduce to you John Flood. He is the Assistant Director for the Office of Emergency Preparedness, but prior to this, he had a very distinguished career. He's having a distinguished career here at UVA as well, but this one, I think, had a few elements of excitement to it. I know UVA has elements of excitement, but why don't you tell us a few things about your work as a Chief Hostage Negotiator. We have a very short clip from the movie Captain Phillips, which John has confessed he has never seen because, the movie is never like real life. But we're going to show one little episode from Captain Phillips because he will tell you about that experience. Yes? A little bit?
A little bit.
A little bit, okay. I have that image of you in your pajamas on the phone with the Pentagon. That's all I remember.
That part of it was true. So, but that wasn't sexy enough for Hollywood, so never made it. Or the guy who actually spoke with the pirates was sitting in his tidy whities. That was we had an actor picked out who was going to play him, but that didn't make it either. So it's kind of fine. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, come on! Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Outstanding. Because today is the 14th anniversary of the tragedies of 9/11, I thought what I would do is kind of juxtapose my career with the events of 9/11 because they do intersect in the September of 2001. So for me, it's kind of cathartic to talk about it a little bit, but I'll bring them together and we'll talk a little bit about my career, etc. So I grew up in Queens, New York. My parents, my father was a New York City fire captain, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She worked for Metropolitan Insurance Company, or MetLife as it is now, but she became a stay-at-home mom. And growing up in an Irish Catholic family during that time period, you were either going to be a cop, a fireman, or a priest. So, I mean, that's kind of the culture, and it's still kind of like that a little bit today. My sister's a nun, so it kind of all fit in there. But no, that's a whole other story. But so I grew up in a typical middle-class family. Went to parochial elementary and high school, and I attended St. John's University, New York, which back in those days were called the Red Men. Now it's politically correct, it's the Red Storm. That's another topic. So I went there and I got a bachelor's in criminal justice. Always wanted to be an FBI agent. There was a TV show on that I know Jim watched, and you guys were nowhere you weren't around then. It's called the FBI with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. He was kind of our role model. So, but that's something I always wanted to do and always kept that in the back of my mind. I did a stint in the United States Coast Guard, so that was thrown in there with the college time. And in 1980, I became a police officer with the Port Authority in New York and New Jersey, and went back to school at night to get a master's in government and politics, which was a blast. That was at St. John's, and I look back at that educational time, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. So I became a police officer for the Port Authority, and some of my time was spent working at the New York City area airports, Kennedy, LaGuardia, and Newark. But I spent a good part of my career at the World Trade Center, where the Port Authority Police then and still does have jurisdiction, because the Port Authority owns the complex. And made a lot of friends, etc. My best man, we were police officers together, so it really became part of my fabric. In 1986, let me just say this too, and I think this is really important for you all to understand. I know the Jim and Steve and his wife, etc., will relate to this. In that period of time, and specifically in around 1980, the economy then was pretty much the way it is now. At that point in time, they were laying off cops, they were laying off firemen. Cities were really in bad shape. So I'm coming out of college, with a degree, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I know a lot of you are probably have that going on in your mind, unless you're in the E-School, which I understand is very easy to get jobs. So, but my point is, stick with it. It will come. I mean, we were in a very similar position 35 years ago or so. So, but anyway, I took the test, etc., and I was finally able to become an FBI agent. As Jim pointed out to you, you go where they want you to go. There is a belief in the Bureau that the assignments are made by a monkey who throws a dart with your name on it onto a map, and that's where you end up. So I grew up in New York City. I was a cop in New York City. Where did they send me? No, I wanted to go back to New York or Newark. I said, I'll go back anywhere in the Northeast, because that was, what I was used to. Where did they send me in their infinite wisdom?
Arizona. Hawaii. Texas.
You're all kind of some of you were in the No, I could have been happy in the LA office. No, they sent me to Little Rock, Arkansas. So that was culture shock. In retrospect, it was a blast, because my wife and I were newlyweds. We're going to be married 29 years Sunday. Twin daughters, both alumna from here. Go Who's. So anyway, they sent us to Little Rock, Arkansas. And opposite of Jim, I had a police background, and the first squad they put me on in Little Rock was working white-collar crime. I was working bank embezzlement. So I'd go in to do an interview or something on a bank case, on an internal fraud, and I'd have to sit down with the bank president, and they'd expect you to know everything there was to know about accounting, et cetera. And I tell them right up front, guys, I don't know anything about this. You have to explain it to me. So I learned, and in retrospect, if I had to do it all over again, I would have been an accounting major, because it did come into play with a lot of the things that I worked. A little bit later on, I did get to work some domestic terrorism cases, white supremacy, et cetera. And then after 2 years of penance in Arkansas, my wife and I did return to New York City for 10 years. And I got to work the World Trade Center case. So I didn't realize we were working it at the same time. TWA 800, a bunch of other cases, working counterterrorism, which I really enjoyed that time. While I was there, an opportunity came up. They were looking for volunteers to become a crisis or a hostage negotiator. And I said, that's pretty cool. And part of my work ethic, and this is something else I'd like to impart on you, growing up in the culture that I grew up in and in the way I was raised by my parents, is we grew up in a culture of service, service to others. It was for me, it was never about the money. It sounds kind of sappy, but it was about helping people, and I still feel that way. That's why I'm working here today at UVA. Very simple work ethic. I wanted to have fun every day when I went to work. I wanted to learn something new every day when I went to work, and I wanted to make a difference. And I know you can attest to that. My entire career with the Bureau and as a police officer, that's what it was. I never learned everything, to this day, I never learned everything there was to know about any of those jobs. I definitely had a blast every day. There was some heartache and some trials and tribulations. But in the most part, you felt good at the end of the day. And that's why I wanted to become a hostage negotiator, because what does a negotiator do? Boil it down, what do they do at the end of the day? What's their end product?
Save people.
Save people's lives. And the satisfaction that I have out of that to this day is that I know there's people walking around today, Captain Phillips being one of them, based on the work that we did. So that meant a lot to me, and I really, if I can impart nothing else on you, it's this idea of service and getting that satisfaction you will get out of it. So in 1989, I went through the training at Quantico for the hostage negotiation school, and it became a part-time job for me. I went back to being a regular investigator chasing terrorists up in New York City. And then in 1997, I came to a juncture where I could take promotion, and I was either going to take over a terrorism squad in New York City or come down here to Virginia and work full-time as a negotiator at Quantico. So I had to drag my wife kicking and screaming and our twins, who were in kindergarten at the time, and we went down and moved to the Quantico area, where we spent the next 14 years. Got involved in a lot of different negotiation cases, most of which will never have heard of. I mean, there's just cases all over the place. Anytime a U.S. citizen gets kidnapped overseas, a la Captain Phillips and his crew, the FBI is responsible for providing the negotiation piece to that. So that became pretty much what we did the most of. Plus, we did instruction, which was a lot of fun. And we did a lot of collaboration. That's when I first became introduced to UVA, because to this day, the unit up in Quantico, and along with the profilers, do a lot of collaboration with the University of Virginia. So that's how I first got exposed to this place. And I remember coming down here saying, wow, what a nice little place to hang my hat at some point when I retire. And so, fortunately, it has worked out that way. So, in terms of the negotiation piece, in 2001, this is where 9/11 comes together. In 2001, around September 7th or 8th, we were out in my unit, along with our hostage rescue team, we're out in San Francisco to do all things a counterterrorism exercise at the airport out in San Francisco. That was going to be the exercise. So we did some classes, some training, and did a little bit of sightseeing. And the morning of September 11th, we were supposed to go up to wine country. That was the plan for the day. Never been up to wine country in California. Figured this would be the day to do it. It was a bright, sunny day, pretty much the way it is here now. So 3 hours time difference. I'm sharing a room with another agent who was very involved with the Captain Phillips case. He's the guy who was in his tidy whities on the phone with the terrorists, but that's a whole other story. So our phones start going off, and it's early. It's like 6-something in the morning, and we're reading. And this is I remember what kind of cell phones we had, but again, they were new. We had pagers. So it talked about planes flying into the World Trade Center and all of a sudden. So we popped on the TV like other folks. I know you guys were 4. You didn't turn the TV on.
Right.
Your parents did probably. And we watched it unfold in front of us. And that was, wow. So for me growing up in New York City, it was like, oh my God. I'm starting to run through my mind guys that I had gone to college and high school with, I knew were firefighters and cops, guys I had worked with. And there's one particular family, there's 5 brothers. One was a cop and 4 of them were firefighters. And they were all, they're the first people who came to mind. The other people who came to mind were guys that I had worked with at the World Trade Center. Now I'm going through my mind, oh, this one transferred, this one retired. Chances are they're okay. So day went on, we were finally able to get on a plane and fly back from San Francisco. We flew on a special flight that the White House had set up for us to come back because we were kind of stuck on the West Coast. We were a national asset that needed to be back in the DC area. So they flew us back. And I remember when we landed at Reagan, it was in the evening, and the Pentagon was still burning, and you could smell it, and the smoke was like banked down all over the place. So that was kind of a surreal experience. So the next day, which would have been September 12th or 13th, because with time changes, it kind of screws you up, I began thinking about, people who I had worked with, et cetera. And I got a phone call from it was a guy I went to St. John's with, we were classmates in the Port Authority. He was okay. And he's reading down the list of the guys and women who were missing, and he pauses and he says, oh, so-and-so is missing, and that's the guy on my bracelet. Here's my best man. So that kind of hit home for me, and to this day, they've never recovered him. The only thing they found from him was his handgun. So he's technically still missing. So for me, that really hit home, the 9/11 piece of it, in terms of how your career weaves in and out. We had seen him and his wife that Easter prior. In March or April of 2001, we went up to Hoboken, and we had a nice day with them. We had dinner and all, because we didn't see each other that often. We were in Virginia, they were in New Jersey, so that's kind of how that intersects. In 2004, I had the opportunity to take a promotion and stay where I was, and I became the unit chief, as Dr. Plaskin indicated. And that's where I was from 2004 to when I retired in 2012, and I had the opportunity to come and serve you folks here at the university in terms of emergency preparedness. The Captain Phillips case, I'll make it real fast. I have not, as Dr. Plaskin indicated, I have not seen the flick. The writers did come to see us from Hollywood, and sex and violence sells, so they were able to get the violence. We couldn't provide them with the sex part of it, so. Other than the fact that the negotiator who was talking with the bad guys was sitting in his living room in his underwear. But in essence, what happened was we watched it unfold, what was going on, and we said, the Navy's going to handle this. They're going to end up whacking them, so they'll never even call us. As Dr. Plaskin indicated, I did get a phone call from some captain in the Navy at midnight and said, hey, on the other line, I have the captain of the Bainbridge. That's the ship that's in this one. I have him on the phone, and they want to know what to do because they're in contact with the pirates, the Somali pirates. So I said, rather than get in the middle of this, I'm going to assign one of my agents, one of the guys who was working with us, and he became the negotiator, which you won't see in the movie. I don't think you don't see it in the movie, but in essence, what was happening was the agent negotiator in his underwear in Fredericksburg was talking to a Navy chief on the ship through an interpreter speaking to the pirates. And as enormous as this may seem, we treated it like any other hostage or kidnapping job that we ever had worked. It was different in terms of the dynamics, but our whole job was just to slow the thing down, which the Navy, it took some education, and they finally got it. We needed to slow it down because the boat is getting closer and closer and closer to Somalia. And the White House had told us they will not allow that boat to get to shore. Because if Captain Phillips had gotten to shore, we'd never get him back. Once he got into Somalia, it would have been a lost cause. So they did have that imaginary line drawn in the Somali sea there. So, but we needed to slow it down. These pirates, as you can see, are very jacked up, etc. So, long and short of the story, that's how it happened. We assisted the Navy in lulling the pirates into a false sense of security, and ultimately, how many have seen the flick? You know how it ends. We were able to lull them into this false sense of security that they could stand up outside the boat, and, well, you know how it ended, so.
So John, why don't I show a little short clip?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just before they evacuate, right? We have a short clip, just a couple minutes for those of you that didn't see the movie. Hopefully it will do its thing.
All right. Ready to leave? 1500?
Absolutely, Cap, you got it.
a little bit farther than I should have, because that's actually what it's leaving for. And we got a ways to go before they eject, okay? However, you do need to know, the movie is yours, it will be in the Tucker Lounge. It'll be next to the new TV when it gets there, so you can see the whole thing. Joe, can you get the lights back up or somebody for me? Sorry about that.
That's
We'll
okay.
get to it, but it's a dramatic movie, you've got to see it, since you know a man who's been associated with it in some way.
The one thing I can say, and this is an interesting segue, the one thing I can say is, to the best of my knowledge, Captain Phillips has no idea that we were involved in saving his life. So, but you know what? That's okay. You know, we had the satisfaction of knowing, and as I said a few moments ago, we had the satisfaction of knowing that people who've never spoken to us, will never know we were in the background doing this, they're alive today because of what we did. So, you know, that's this whole idea of service, and that's me, that's my work ethic and what's important to me. And everybody has a different way of approaching things, but for me, that's what gives me the self-satisfaction, that there are people alive today because of things that we did. And the work that I continue to do here at the university with emergency preparedness is getting us ready for bad things. Hopefully they don't happen, but it's still hand in glove with taking care of people and making sure they're safe, etc. Does anybody have any questions for me? Because I know you all want to tear out of here on Friday afternoon.
Well, first, we got to give him a round of applause, yeah? Jim, come on. Anything you want to ask them? This is your chance.
How much desk work was it?
I know what my desk work is like. Go ahead.
You know, every time you do an interview, you gotta write it up. You know, it's a fair amount. I mean, you rather do the interviews, the writing it up of it is not the fun part for sure. It's a fair amount.
For me, it was the desk, you know, writing things up, all the paperwork to back up, because all our stuff could potentially be evidence in court. Then as a manager, I had to do lesson plans, because we were teaching, I had to do personnel evaluations, payroll, all that other stuff. So yes, it's a lot of paperwork.
I do have a question. You commented to me about, you chose accounting for a specific reason, right?
Because at that point in time, the easiest, if I can use that term, path into the bureau was either an attorney or an accountant, and I chose an accountant.
You had that as your goal.
That
You
was
wanted to
my-
be an FBI agent.
Yes,
You figured
never-
out
yeah.
that if I did that path as opposed to being maybe a foreign studies major, being an accountant was exactly the kind of skills they were looking for. Question? Yes.
I was just wondering about the presence of women in the field. Has it increased or?
Well, it certainly has increased because it wasn't until Hoover dies in
Hoover's 70, 71, he died.
70. Yeah, so it wasn't until after Hoover came that they had women. But now, so like the class I took a class, class counselor. We had about, I would say it was about 20-25% women.
So I had 3 women negotiators in my unit, and they were good. I mean, there were certain cases where I'd rather use a woman because they were able to impart empathy a lot better, just depending on the situation. These guys, different situations, but a lot of times the women they had that nice touch.
But you'll do, you know, there aren't women agents, there aren't men agents, there are agents, and they're gonna be assigned. There's a woman I worked with in Dallas. She spent her whole career chasing and arresting fugitives. There are some that were on a terrorism squad.
Yeah.
They do everything that, you know, like I say, they don't distinguish. And now there's some that are better for certain situations, like John said, but you get your caseload, you're expected to do it.
How's the health plan?
The health plan.
You get good.
I was the benefits great. I didn't come in for the benefits, but they were great.
That's two things I value.
Were either of you ever in a situation because of your job where you felt in danger? Like there was like people that somehow could, I guess, harm you?
On the streets of Newark, going through arresting people. Yeah, there were a few times.
I meant more of like, were there any like that you could tell as a story? Sorry. I was trying to leave that out, but I guess not. If there, you know.
Well, no, I mean, there are any, like I say, you're in some of the bad neighborhoods, and you know, sometimes people in those neighborhoods, when you go out to arrest people, they're happy. Hey, listen, we don't like this guy and he's a pain in the neck, everything like that. And sometimes they're very supportive. Sometimes they resent you as much, why are you taking him away? I mean, he's, and so it's not always a good situation.
Have you ever met the president, and if so, in what capacity?
I have never met the president. The closest I've come, I guess, is the attorney general.
I met the Attorney General a couple of times. One of the guys who worked for me had to brief the president on Paul Burko when he was kidnapped.
What's the hardest case that you've encountered?
The hardest case. That's an interesting
That's
question.
tough, yeah.
They were all hard, right?
They were,
To a certain
well,
extent?
they were all fun.
They were all hard. He loves his work. None of them were hard.
If I had to do, I mean, so I'll give you, I'll give you a couple of cases that were, okay. So when I'm working in Dallas, there was a guy by the name of Edwin L. Cox, and he was on the board of directors for a bank there, and he was also into cattle, trading commodities and what have you. His father was Edwin L. Cox Sr., so it is the Edwin L. Cox Sr. School of Business at SMU. So, and he had came into the bank one time, and he said, that $80 million you lent me, it's gone. All the collateral that I said I had, it's gone. You're either going to work with me or I'm going to declare bankruptcy and you're going to be out 80 grand. So as part of that, I had to learn about the commodities and what's trading. What is a hedge trade? What is a speculative trade? So there's a learning curve in there. So from an institutional knowledge, because in theory, if I have to testify, I have to, I'm subject to cross-examination, and someone's going to say, okay, tell me about this commodity trade, tell me about this. So not only do you have to know about the fraud, the fraud part of it was pretty easy, but you have to know about the mechanism, how it takes place. And so it took a lot that was not my forte for sure, but it took a lot there. From a standpoint of, from a different side, I worked an organized crime case here in Charlottesville, where most of the players and everything was up in New York. So there was, it was difficult to sort of coordinate things like that. But at the end of the day, they were all great.
Excellent. Nice. All right, we keep having questions. Simon.
Did you work on any cases that you never closed?
Yes. There are a few that, like the fishermen, the ones that got away. Yeah, there are a few of those.
Ava, do you have a question?
Yeah. So how realistic would you both say are the representations of the FBI, the daily work in that in movies, TV shows, or what parts are usually exaggerated for the most?
The one I always like to comment on is that Hollywood always depicts us as being bumbling idiots who don't get along with the local cops. And I know, because you worked here in Charlottesville, we couldn't have done our job if we didn't get. And having been one, you don't forget where you came from. So they vastly over-exaggerate that piece of it. That we're going to take over the case from you.
Yeah.
Never, in my career, never happened, not once.
Yeah. The other thing, one is they generally solve a case in an hour.
Yeah.
And in my career, I've never done that. So the other thing is sort of, if there's something that makes me grind my teeth, it is the way the interviews are conducted.
Yeah.
They're very short. They're they're almost threatening. Interviews are much more, particularly complicated interviews, in a white collar crime matter or an organized crime. They take a long time. This 2-minute interview where you think you've gained all the knowledge you can is just ludicrous. So if there was one thing in all those shows, like I say, that makes me grind my teeth, it's how they interview people, because that's nothing how it's done in real life.
and I am sure they're going to want to interview you guys more at some point in the future. So I am going to, in the interest of time, extend an invitation to you to come to the screening of Captain Phillips when we do it in Tucker Lounge, so you can see the whole movie. I think I would love to have you there. Jim, you can come along for moral support.
All right.
But I think what we want to do is give both these guys a round of applause. They both have been very modest, you know, they're at the top of their game. You just read the articles, of course, and you can look at them and see the work that they have done, so it's been terrific. So thank you so much.